During the first half of the 20th century, Russia experienced one crisis after another. World War I, the Russian Revolution, the Civil War, and World War II forced the country to mobilize millions of soldiers to fight on the front lines. Each one of them was a mouth to be fed, for, as all governments know, when troops starve they abandon military duties and run from the army. On the other hand, undernourished soldiers are more likely to be defeated, since they do not have enough energy to perform effectively. In World War II, the Soviet Union had to organize the supply of its armed forces so that they did not suffer from lack of food. This was a gigantic effort, because the economic situation was far from adequate to participate in a war of these dimensions. During the fight, the Russian soldiers learned a hard lesson: on the battlefield there are no luxuries. Today, in this new episode of Military History, we'll tell you everything about what the Soviet troops ate in World War II. But before we start, we'd like to thank Factor 75 for sponsoring this video. The best option to receive fresh food at home. Far from what the Soviets ate, today we can eat exquisite dishes, even without having to cook them ourselves. Because Factor 75 offers the best options to solve your kitchen problems, no more unhealthy fast food. Factor chefs prepare more than 27 dishes and 34 different additional options, completely fresh for you. You can choose your dishes or let them do it for you, based on your tastes and your order history. Then they deliver it to your door and take care of everything. The Soviets would die to try it, and you can't miss it. Use my link or go to go.factor75.com and use the code FACTORS36999 for 50% off your first box. Now let's continue with today's video. Are you ready? Let's get started. In June 1941, the Third Reich launched Operation Barbarossa and began its invasion of the Soviet Union. Despite the fact that the Germans would end up regretting this campaign, the truth is that, in its beginnings, it was successful. The Red Army could not properly defend the Eastern Front, on the one hand, because it was too large a territory, and on the other because the Soviet military performance was extremely poor. The Nazis had superior weapons and tactics, and very soon the most important agricultural regions of Russia were in the hands of the Germans. In this way, the Soviet troops were deprived of their main source of food. Until the beginning of 1943, the communist forces fought under hardship conditions, eating the first thing they could find. A Russian soldier received a lean daily ration, consisting of a loaf of bread, canned lard spread, and vegetables left over from previous meals. One of the toughest moments of the war was the Battle of Stalingrad, between August 1942 and February 1943, when the Soviets had to defend the city from the Wehrmacht. On that occasion, the Red Army had to supply itself locally, that is, looting even the houses of its own compatriots, since they lacked the most basic provisions. In addition, they almost never managed to capture any food stores from the Germans, who in turn also suffered from serious supply problems. Since 1943, the countries of the Allied side began to help the Soviet Union through loans of money and resources, so that the communist forces could face the Germans on equal terms. The typical ration of a Russian soldier consisted of a piece of black bread, wheat flour, macaroni, meat, fish, and oatmeal. This was supplemented with sugar, tea, salt, and vegetables such as carrots, potatoes, beets, and cabbage. Tobacco was also regulated, as a man received 20 grams a day, and 3 boxes of matches a month. For women destined for the battlefield, the ration included butter, biscuits, and chocolate. The pilots received some extra items, such as fresh milk, cottage cheese, eggs and nuts. Submarine personnel were given sauerkraut, salted cucumbers, raw onions, and red wine. The purpose of these foods was to prevent scurvy and compensate for the lack of oxygen inside the submarines. It is interesting to note that the rations for the infantrymen did not include water, which they had to fetch at their own expense. This led many to turn to alcoholic beverages such as vodka. On the other hand, because pork was of great importance in rations, Jewish and Muslim Red Army soldiers complained to the officers, since their religion did not allow them to eat this food. However, nothing was done by the High Command to change this, and these troops had no choice but to accept this food or starve. A good part of the supplies consumed by Soviet soldiers was sent by England, which in turn bought them from Brazil and Argentina. These foods were canned and included meats, soups, concentrated broths, and pork jerky. Curiously, the Red Army officers forgot to relabel these products, which were distributed directly to the troops. The vast majority of the men could not read the labels written in English, creating serious logistical confusion. Nobody knew what the cans that were distributed contained, although this error was quickly corrected by applying small paper labels with an inscription in Russian indicating what was inside. One of the most popular foods on the Eastern Front was Spam, a canned food of North American origin. It was made with chopped pork, ham, salt, water, potatoes, and sodium nitrate. The United States government sent large quantities to the Soviet Union to prevent famines in the military and among the civilian population. Its importance was so great that Nikita Khrushchev, the future Soviet leader, wrote the following in his memoirs: "Without Spam, we would have been unable to feed our men." When everything else was scarce, the Red Army troops received this as their only food, 3 times a day, 7 days a week. For his part, Stalin was displeased to see that his forces were massively consuming a meal made in the great capitalist power of the United States, so he ordered to change the name of Spam to Tashanka, so that at least it would have a Russian sound. As for the supply, the Soviets developed a dynamic system for the moments in which their armies were in the middle of a combat. The soldiers' meals were prepared in field kitchens located behind the battle lines. These kinds of kitchens were typical of 19th century Russia, and were placed in the back of a truck or on a wheeled trailer. Each one had up to 4 cauldrons where the food was cooked, a compartment to store the food and the utensils with which to prepare everything. They ran on wood, so there were strict orders to cook early, before sunrise, or at night, just after sunset. With this, it was sought to prevent any enemy from detecting the smoke in the distance, and attacking the camp by surprise. Those in charge of preparing the dishes were generally women, and it was estimated that a simple one-course meal took an hour and a half. One of the specialties of the field kitchens were soups, which were easy to make and cheap. The most common were kalesh, which was made from millet and lard, borscht, which was made from beetroot, and shkai, cabbage soup. Once the dish was ready, the odyssey of delivering it to the soldiers who were immersed in combat began. One man had to carry the heavy cauldron of food from the field kitchen to the trench over uneven terrain, crowded with soldiers huddled together, bullets whizzing around them and shells exploding nearby. If he managed to survive and overcome all these obstacles, then he would deliver dinner to his unit mates, who would congratulate him on the feat, and together they would enjoy a warm meal. In short, the experience of the Soviet troops became, at times, a real nightmare, and it was only thanks to willpower that they managed to stay on their feet despite the severe food restrictions. We have reached the end of the video and we want to ask you, would you like to try the food of a Soviet soldier? Leave your answer in the comment box below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history.